Welcome to the Vision of Basketball Training podcast. I appreciate you guys who are tuning in today on Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or Pandora, or SoundCloud, Google Podcasts, wherever you may be listening from. Shout out to you guys, and of course, everybody who is on YouTube right now watching. If you are on YouTube, drop a like and subscribe as well if you're new. Typically, episodes come out every Sunday. I apologize for this week. This will probably come out on Wednesday. And I was actually in Miami this past weekend. And so, actually, I was there till I didn't end up getting home till like 4 o'clock in the morning. I had to drive back from the airport at midnight. So, Monday was kind of a tough day, to say the least. But had to get this out because I needed to talk about some stuff that I took from the conference that I was at in Miami, which I'll talk about in a second. Some lessons that I learned that have been major for me already, and I know are definitely going to help you guys as well. So I want to talk about that. Before I get to that, if you are on Apple Podcasts right now, do me a favor and scroll down, leave a review for me. When I get new reviews, I read them on the show. So I have one today, and it says, incredibly informative basketball podcast, I assume. It kind of cut off. Very well-made basketball podcast that sheds light on very interesting topics that not many people think/talk about. By far my favorite podcast out there, along with the Attention to Detail podcast. Shout out to Coleman. It really shows serious players how they can consistently be improving their game as a whole. Great work, Coach. So I appreciate that review. If you guys want me to read your review, go ahead and leave one for me on Apple Podcasts. I appreciate you guys, and let's hop into it. So for those of you guys who follow me on Instagram, you saw me posting a little bit about the player development conference in Miami that I was at. It was run by Mastery Hoops. So first of all, a couple shout outs. Shout out to the Mastery Hoops team, Coleman and Tyler, who you guys, good chance you guys know them, by any means basketball and TJL Training. Both those guys put on this conference, and it was incredible. Brought in some of the best in the player development area, guys like Drew Hanlen, Devin Williams, Devin the Lab, guys like Tim Martin and Mike G, Micah Lancaster, and PJF Performance. Paul came in as well. And then, of course, Coleman and Tyler gave their presentations as well. So a lot of really, really high-level basketball and performance minds there. And it was just a really, really well-run conference. And I mean, also, there was a lot of people that I met there who weren't even talking, who were just like me, like trainers, coaches, going there to just learn more that I was able to connect with. And I'll have some of those guys coming on the show at some point as interviews. There's a lot of really good basketball minds there. So really, really well put together conference. And so I want to talk about a few things that I learned, though, because, I was taking notes the whole time, and, I was kind of going through, and I was like, there's a lot of stuff in here that I think is incredibly like a game changer for coaches and trainers, but also I think a lot of it is applicable for players as well in certain contexts. So we'll get into that. It was actually really awesome too. At this conference, I probably had 7 or 8 coaches come up to me and be like, "Hey, I listened to your podcast. Like, I really like what you do." And I've always kind of assumed my podcast had a lot more players, and I think it does have more players to listen to it. But it's great to see that like coaches, trainers are also listening to the podcast as well, because one thing that I've been saying recently is like, I think that where the shift is going to come, that was one of the big things with this conference, just talking about like shifting kind of those old rooted beliefs or old rooted approaches that, might have just been the way things have always been done in this industry, because this basketball industry is probably like 15, 20 years behind what the actual science would say when it comes to a lot of the methodologies that are still getting pushed when it comes to training and how to become the best player possible and all this stuff. So kind of the first step to getting there and ultimately benefiting players and helping them become better is by reaching the coaches and the trainers, the ones who are actually having influence on the players in their circles. So that was the power of a conference like this, is you got to take these 8 speakers, and now they're able to, instill their knowledge and all this information to the 130 of us who are there, and we go take that back to all of our various players, which is going to reach thousands and thousands of players, and that's how you start to make a shift. So that's why I thought this conference was so incredible, because it really like is going to make an effect because of the amount of people who are affected by it. So all that to be said, I appreciate all the coaches and trainers who listen to my podcast, and if you are a coach or trainer, you want to be on the show, send me a DM. Again, I probably have 3 or 4 guests that I talk to that I'm going to have on from the conference, so just let me know. But let's hop into it. So I want to talk specifically about 3 different, and there's so many things I learned, and I'll probably talk about more of them in different episodes, but I want to talk about my top 3 things that I learned from this conference, and how it applies to you if you're a coach or trainer, but also you as a player as well, especially this first one. So the number one lesson that I learned from the speakers from the conference this weekend was that you have to connect with the human first before you can effectively connect with the player. And this is something that relates to coaches and trainers. Obviously, that's the biggest area, but also players as well. This is absolutely applicable to you as well. If you want to be a great leader on your team, you have to understand this concept as well. So obviously coaches and trainers is important for you guys, but players as well, it's important that you understand why this is important and how you can go about doing it. So the first speaker of the weekend was Tim Martin. Shout out to him. And he first started off talking about 3 life-changing principles that he's kind of come across as a trainer. And I'm only going to talk about the first one, the third one. But the first one he talked about was communication and translation. Then the third one was practice empathy. So those are 2 of those 3 life-changing pillars, life-changing principles that he talked about. There's a lot that goes into that first part, right? The first thing is that conversations are way better than lectures, right? Having conversations with your players, with your teammates, or I'll address it from both approaches. If you're a trainer, having conversations with your players, like, hey, how'd you play this weekend? Okay, what'd you do well? Okay, what do you think you could have done better, right? How do you feel about, our workouts the last couple of weeks? Like, are you feeling good? Like, what areas are you struggling with? How are your team practices going? How are your team workouts going? How are you doing in your tournaments? Asking these questions and not just allowing it to be a lecture about, okay, well, you need to do this and then do this and then do that. That allows players to be way more engaged. And engaged is going to be a word that's going to come up a lot more throughout, especially this first topic right here. But it's important that you get feedback and you ask questions and you also encourage questions. You encourage curiosity from your players because that allows them to take more ownership into what you're doing. So they care more about what you're doing because they feel like they have a part in it, right? When they're able to give their feedback, they're able to ask questions to you and you ask questions to them, right? They feel like, okay, well, he cares about what I have to say. She cares about, what I have to say or what I think about this topic. So it's important that we understand that part, that it's really important to get our players engaged with that. And again, going back to players as well, right? It's important that you're not, if you're one of the leaders on your team, you can't just be the guy who's going around and lecturing everybody about, oh, you guys need to work hard, you guys need to do this, you guys need to do that. It's important that you really get your teammates to be engaged, right? You are constantly getting feedback from your teammates, asking about things that you could do better, right? It can be with your coaches as well, asking your coaches what you can do better, asking questions that are going to help you to become better. I think that's what becomes important is prioritizing conversations over lectures, right? That's what you want to understand first. And so one of the examples that Tim gave with this was he was working out with Tyrese Maxey, who's with the Sixers, and this was their first ever workout. And this is just kind of a simple example. They were going through a passing drill, and there were different sorts of passes that he might throw off of this. So maybe it's a behind the back bounce pass, or maybe it's a hook pass or a pocket pass, whatever, just working on different kinds of passes out of a ball screen. And so as they're going through this, Tim is asking Tyrese, like, okay, when's the situation where you use this pass? Okay, why would you use that pass? What's the situation where you'd use this pass? And why would you do that? And so now Tyrese becomes more engaged in it. And so, like I said, engagement's going to be a word that we use a lot. But now he's more focused. He's more involved with what they're doing. And that allows him to take a little bit more ownership over what's going on as well. So that's an example of kind of how to use questions to make your players progress and get more out of your sessions that you're going through. And it's important that we understand that first, right? Communication when it comes to just having conversation, incredibly important for you as a player, trainer, or as a coach, obviously. So then that next part, right, is practice empathy. And this is where, the quote that Tim uses, that you might not be the best, right? You might not be the best trainer in the world. You might not be the best player in the world, whatever. But if you love people, then you're going to be impactful, right? And if you're a trainer, your players are going to appreciate you for that, and they're going to get better because of that. And if you're a player, your teammates are going to appreciate you for that, and they're going to get better because of that as well. So a lot of that has to do with, first of all, relatability. So that comes down to learning about them as people and really understanding, like, okay, what are their likes? What do they do off the court? Like, what else do they have going on? Do you have anything do you have any similarities outside of basketball, right? Or outside of, performance training, whatever the case may be, right? Do you guys like certain types of movies, right? Maybe you guys both enjoy the same sort of, types of movies, the same sort of TV shows, whatever it may be. Maybe you guys root for the same sports team, or you guys are both really big into fantasy football, or whatever? Like, do you guys have stuff you can talk about outside of the game of basketball? Do you know them as a player, as someone that you train, as you coach, as your teammate? Like, do you know them outside of the game of basketball? I think that is very, very important when it comes to being able to practice empathy and being relatable to the players that you're with. And so going with that is the importance of positive reinforcement, right? So this comes down to pointing out when your players do something well, right? Because practice, we're going to get to this later, but practice should be challenging, right? It shouldn't be something that's easy. So there's going to be a lot of mistakes, and a lot of players, like a lot of coaches don't get this. A lot of coaches are used to like a lot of coaches have had to go through, situations where they've had to mess up. They've tried to do something and it hasn't worked out, and they've been able to overcome it. So at this point, they kind of innately understand, like, mistakes happen. Sometimes you mess things up. You just keep on going, right? But players a lot of times haven't been through enough to really understand that. So when they make mistakes, it really like wears on them and it really beats on them. So it's important to first of all be able to identify that and be like, listen, it's all right to, like, mistakes are not a bad thing, especially when I'm trying to make you mess up, right? That's one thing. But also when they do stuff well, right? When they complete something and it maybe takes them a while, but they figure it out, like giving them a high five and pointing out like, hey, that was great. Right? They make a move that you've worked on that they've never done before, right? That they've never actually succeeded with against defense, and they pull it out after you've been working on it. Something to point out to them right there, right? They do some sort of footwork correctly in the context of maybe a one-on-one or something, and maybe they missed the shot, maybe they missed the layup, but the actual approach to it, the process was correct. So that's a great opportunity to just point that out, be like, hey, that was great that you did that right there, because then they get to start, that builds confidence for them, and again, it builds that relationship, right? You can't really have an impact on somebody if you don't have a good relationship with them. It's just not how it works, right? And the days of coaching where you could be kind of a stoic and kind of cold individual who's kind of reserved and never really emotional or connected with your players, that's just not how things are, right? If you want to be as effective as you can be, right? There's, that's the thing with, they talk about Bill Belichick, right? And for those of you guys who don't know who Bill Belichick is, he's the head coach of the New England Patriots. It's crazy. I love talking to my players about football. Like, I'll bring up football with some of my players, and they'll have like no idea who I'm like, you guys don't know who like Barry Sanders is, or like all these, like it's funny. But so Bill Belichick, right? His style of coaching is very, very like, at least from the outside, right? I obviously haven't played for the Patriots, so I can't give you my own experience. But he's very cold. He's very like serious. He's very like, all business. He's a guy like, listen, if you go out and you don't do your job, like that's the Patriots slogan is, right? Do your job, right? Patriots will cut people very quickly because they have a way of doing things that they've built over, however many years Bill's been there, 20 plus years. And those, the Super Bowls, the 6 Super Bowls kind of speak for itself. Or is it 5 or 6? I don't know. I'm not a Patriots fan. I think it's 6 though. And so the thing is, though, like a lot of Bill Belichick's assistants will leave New England and get head coaching jobs, and they'll try to be Bill Belichick. They'll try to be super hard and super cold and super like, drill sergeant. Like, this is how we do things right here. You're gonna act this way. You're gonna be this. And most of the time, those coaches fizzle out. Like, they don't last. They aren't able to kind of instill that same culture. Well, why is that? The reason is that Bill Belichick has his 6 rings, right? So he can say, listen, I win Super Bowls. This is what I do. So if you want to come in and win Super Bowls, then you do it this way. If you don't want to win Super Bowls, then we'll ship you out. We'll get somebody else who does. So players want to be a part of that, right? They are willing to sacrifice. They're willing to fall in line because the proof of concept is there. If you're Bill Belichick's assistant, you haven't won anything. You've been an assistant. Maybe you have a ring, but you weren't the head coach. So you go somewhere and a player's going to be like, why should I buy into what you have to say? Like, why would I do that? So players are going to resent you and probably not want to play for you. So you're going to get fired because you're going to lose a lot of games, right? So you have to understand that's the same thing as a coach in your position right there, right? You can't just go in and be like, this is how we do things, my way or the highway, because unless you're Bill Belichick, Greg Popovich, these guys who've won a lot, Coach K, you just can't do it that way, right? Even Coach K had to adjust. Coach K used to not want to recruit one-and-done players. He wanted to only get guys who were going to stay for 4 years, but then he realized eventually, he's like, well, I'm going to lose. I'm not going to be able to win if I don't start recruiting these one-and-dones. So he had to adapt, right? So that's a big part of it, is you have to be able to relate to your players, and your players have to have a good relationship with you. They have to enjoy being around you. That's where the basis comes from when it comes to actually building them up as players. So the quote that was used was a Maya Angelou quote, and she said, "People will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel." Right? So they're going to forget the little pointers that you tell them. They're going to forget the little things. Hey, when you come off a ball screen, make sure you look at that next time. You do that next time. Hey, when you go to the rim, we're going to step with this foot and that. Like they're going to that stuff. That's lessons that like maybe they'll subconsciously remember when they're playing, but they're not going to remember you telling them that exactly. Right? They're going to remember though if they enjoyed being in your sessions. They're going to remember like, hey, I really enjoyed being with that coach. It was fun, and we had great conversations, and he cared about where I was at as a person and as a player. And talking to when Tim was talking about retaining your players, like that was the big key. Is like they have to, when they think of you and your sessions, that has to be a positive thing for them. And it's hard to do when you don't connect with them on a human level. You don't relate to them on a human level. So same thing again as a player, right? You have to make sure that not only are you relating to your players or to your teammates basketball wise, but you are somebody who they enjoy being teammates with. Right? You're always encouraging to those guys. You're always lifting those guys up. You're always willing to shelter, blame, and responsibility when necessary and not try and point fingers at people. You're willing to be a great teammate, and they might forget the things that you say and things that you do, but they're going to remember how they felt being on a team with you. And generally, that's going to it's either going to be for a good reason or a bad reason, right? So you want to keep that in mind as well, that it's supremely important how they feel being with you as opposed to the actual things that you may say or do. So that was Tim Martin. He was great. Shout out to him. But going along with that topic, Mike G talked a little bit about this as well, and learned a ton from Mike G as well. So he talked about prime time and going back to engagement, and then how engagement leads to productive workouts, productive sessions. And we'll kind of dive into this right here. So kind of how he started off his presentation. It was actually the first presentation on day 2. And so obviously he was like, listen, guys, I understand. We're in Miami. Last night was Saturday night. It's Sunday morning at 9 a.m. So some of you guys probably aren't feeling great after being in Miami on Saturday night. So he got us all up out of the bleachers, and then he had us do these weird games, weird partner games. We all got partners. We all did these little games, and he was just like, okay, that is how we build engagement. And he was like, notice how you feel now compared to 5 minutes ago before we did that. You guys are probably feeling kind of sluggish. You're kind of feeling like, I don't know how I'm going to feel about this. And then we go do those little games, and all of a sudden you feel energized, you feel good, you feel engaged, like you're mentally like focused on what I'm talking about now. And all it took was a 5-minute priming of your mind. So this got into the concept of prime time versus a warm-up, right? Where prime time actually primes your athletes mentally to excel, as opposed to a warm-up that's just focused on the physical side of things. So when we talk about those wake-up games, it actually physiologically changes you, right? Your heart rate goes up, your body temperature goes up, blood flow goes up. But aside from just those normal things, which you can get out of a normal dynamic warm-up where you do your skips and your lunges and your squats, it actually improves your mood and your morale. Like we were all smiling, having fun, like competing, like it was enjoyable. And so we all felt better mentally and emotionally after that 5 minutes, as well as feeling better physically too. That increases that focus and engagement, which leads to a better session moving forward as well. So this little 5-minute warm-up is what Mike called prime time. Essentially, where it starts is that when your athletes walk in, you first have to kind of read the room, right? They come into a session, and you got to be able to look and say, okay, how are they feeling, right? Body language is going to tell you a lot. You might not even have to ask them, and they might tell you everything just by how they walk in. They're feeling like they're walking in real slow, shoulders are down, they just look tired, right? And that can be a situation sometimes. Maybe it was a long weekend for them. They come in on Monday morning and they just look dead tired, right? Maybe it was us on Sunday morning. We come in, and everyone just looks tired, right? So you have to be able to kind of read the room and know your athletes, right? So if you have athletes you work with all the time, then you should be able to tell, like, if they come in on a day and they are just feeling, they're just not at 100%, right? And whether that be physically or mentally, they might not be there, right? They might not be all the way there yet. So it's important that you as a coach don't just like let that go, right? You have to try and fix that a little bit, which you can sometimes, especially with these sort of primetime activities. So, you have to kind of gauge the mood and the energy when they come in. And you also have to think about things like, again, going back to understanding the human, what kind of stress could they be going through in addition to the athletics, right? think about it's going to be different. Like in high school, right? What are they stressed out about? Well, maybe they have a big test tomorrow. Maybe they just had a big test today and they didn't do well on it, right? Maybe tryouts are coming up. They're stressed about that. Whatever. Like there's a lot of different things that you as a high school player could be stressed out about that has nothing to do with basketball. That could be affecting their mood or their energy coming into, that particular session. I know, especially you think about like maybe you have some seniors who are applying to schools, right? And they're worried about, am I going to get into the school? Is my essay good enough? Is my SAT good enough? Like all that stuff that goes into it, like that can weigh on you. If you have stress, and this is what PJF talked about a little bit, was like stress hurts your ability to be able to recover, right? So if you're stressed out about a lot of other things, that can certainly affect you when it comes to your workouts as well. So something to think about right there. In college, what are they stressed about? Maybe they have a big test. Maybe they have games coming up. Maybe they're not getting a ton of playing time. They're worried about this happening. Maybe they just got a new coach. There's a lot of things. Maybe maybe they are about to graduate and they're worried about what they're going to do next. Like there's a lot of things you can, that as a college player, as a pro player, what are they worried about, right? Potentially they have a family. Potentially there's, they're worried about, trying to make sure that they make the roster, and they're thinking about like, well, if I don't play well, then what's going to happen? All this sort of stuff, right? So you have to evaluate and understand that stresses are different for different people, but also everyone's dealing with something at the time. So something to consider as well. You got to think about how productive sessions typically are with your athletes who aren't quite as motivated or engaged. It's typically not as good, right? You're probably not going to get as much out of it. They're not going to learn as much. They're not going to really improve as much as you'd like. And you're probably not going to enjoy it as much. It's way more fun to work with athletes who are engaged, who are locked in, who are motivated, than it is to work with the one who isn't. And so the thing to understand is that intense and attention are the most important parts of how your players approach those workouts. The intent needs to be there, and they need to be giving you their full attention, giving the work their full attention. If they're not, you're not going to see the result that you want to see. And generally, if you want to have, you want them to learn specific skills, then they have to have that intent. They have to be paying attention. It has to be at a high level right there. So what these primetime kind of warm-ups do is they mentally engage that athlete so that we have that focus and they are locked in. The intent's there. The attention is there. But it also hits those physical needs as well when it comes to, increasing that heart rate, increasing the body temperature, working different movements as well. So it's actually a dynamic warm-up, but it's better because now you have them engaged mentally, and that means that when the rest of the session comes, you start to work on your actual basketball specific stuff, you have an engaged athlete who's going to get way more out of that session as opposed to if you just brought them in, sent them through a normal dynamic warm-up, and they still are not mentally there, right? So being able to connect with your athletes mentally is super, super, super important. And with these primetime actions, you can do a lot more, and it's a lot easier to do that. So that was kind of the couple things that we talked about. And then it was like, so how do we implement these primetime ideas? How do we implement these primetime warm-ups? So I'll approach this from a couple different perspectives. But the first thing we talked about was games, right? So literally just, and this is what Mike would do with some of his NBA clients, right? With Drew Holiday, Anthony Davis, these guys that he works with, they would just sometimes come out and they'd start with spike ball. They play spike ball for 5 minutes. They play volleyball for a little bit. And now the guys, like, they're not thinking about like, oh, okay, it's a warm-up. I'm working this different movement. I'm working on these lunges. No, they're just worried about like, I'm just trying to win. I'm just trying to play volleyball and win. They're having fun. They're competing. And they're having to react to a stimulus, which is the volleyball or the spike ball. So that's something to think about. Soccer is another great one where you're having to actually get all these movements that are different from basketball. And your heart rate's going up, body temperature's going up, and you're competing and having fun. Right, so now when you finish that, your athletes have been competing, they've been going back and forth, and now they're mentally engaged with what you're doing, and they've already warmed up, and they're in a spot. That's why prime time is such a superior way to do things as opposed to just a normal warm-up, right? You get the best of both worlds. So highly recommend for any coaches, trainers out there, start to implement this primetime idea. And it's not just games. You don't have to just play games. You can literally do something as simple as tag, right? And I'll probably post about this on Instagram because I was doing this the other day. You literally can just play tag with your players. So you could do like one thing that I'll do is like a dribble tag where like I'll have one of my players start on the baseline. They're the offensive player, and one player starts on defense, kind of in the middle of the paint. And that offensive player has the whole entire like half court. They have corner to corner. They're trying to get to half court. And they have to essentially avoid getting tagged by the other player. Both players have basketballs. They have to be dribbling. that defensive player is trying to tag the offensive player, and they're just trying to avoid them and get to half court. Right, so there's one example of tag. Another example is where, if you guys follow me on Instagram, you would have seen this. I posted where I basically set up a circle with cones, right? And you can do this with like a half court circle, which is kind of big, so it'll make it a little tougher. But I set up a circle with cones, and we literally just, like, I had my two players, like one of them was it, and the other was just trying to get away. And they had to stay around these cones. They couldn't go across the cones. They just had to stay in this circle. So now we're working on, sprinting, curvilinear angles, working on change of direction, deceleration. They don't know that. They don't know that they're trying to play tag. They're just trying not to get tagged. They're trying to tag the other person. Then we add a basketball into that as well. So they both have a basketball. They have to do the same exact thing. Now we're working on those same curvilinear angles. We're working on deceleration, change of direction, but we're doing it all with a basketball, which makes it exactly what you'd be doing in a game, right? And they don't even know that. They're just trying to play tag, right? And they're having fun. They're competing, and now they're engaged mentally. And it literally was in a fun and very beneficial way when it comes to the actual basketball side of things. So that's another thing right there. Highly recommend you guys follow Mike G on Instagram. It's Mr. Do It Moving. Phenomenal follow. And if you are a player, a trainer, a coach, like, make sure you guys give him a follow, because the primetime idea is phenomenal. Literally something that I've been doing every day since. So shout out to him as well. So the second thing I want to get to, second point I want to talk about from this conference, was that skill coaches and performance coaches need to merge, right? And this was something that Paul brought up, PJF Performance. He brought up the fact that within 10 years, skill coaches and performance coaches, those two worlds are going to combine, and one coach is going to be the person for players, right? You're going to go to one coach who's going to be your skill guy and your performance guy, right? So you can't just be one or the other, because moving forward, the importance of the performance side of things is, like, it's not something that you can just ignore. And if you're a skills coach, the thing to understand is that you are a performance coach right now. You might not even think about it. I didn't think about this, right? But if you're a skills coach, you are a performance coach. When you're dribbling and you're working on different sorts of moves, you're working on deceleration, you're working on acceleration. Like we're talking about that tag drill, you're working on moving in curvilinear angles, you're working on absorbing force, all that stuff that is actually the performance side of things. You're working with ball handling. So if you don't understand that stuff and how to develop it, then you're going to be limited with how good your players can become. Kyrie Irving is a great ball handler, obviously, but if Kyrie Irving couldn't get himself in those angles, he couldn't get his shins in those shin angles, he didn't have the hip mobility to be able to do some of the stuff that he does, he wouldn't be nearly as good. If he didn't have the stability and the core strength to be able to finish in those acrobatic ways, he wouldn't be nearly as good. That's all performance related, not just basketball related. Okay, so those two things are not quite as separate as people might think that they are. And if players can merge those two things with one coach, then it becomes way easier for them to manage load, so injuries go down and performance goes up. So that's why moving forward, like the future of this industry is that your skills coach is also your performance coach, because they're able to manage exactly what you're doing, know exactly how much to prescribe you, know when to reel back, when to push forward, and that's going to lead to less injuries and better performance from players in general. Okay, so if you're a skills coach right now, and this is as much to myself, because this is definitely something that I thought about, is like, you've got to get yourself to a point where you understand the language of performance, right? That was something that Paul talked about. It's like, skills coaches need to be at a point where they can speak that performance language, because that's what the future is going to be. And so something to understand with that too is that, when it comes to movements, right? We talked about with ball handling, whatever, right? A lot of kids are specializing really, really early. And this kind of go back to the games I was talking about, the primetime stuff. But kids are specializing really early. That's why basketball right now is at the best it's ever been when it comes to skill, right? The players today are so skilled, especially at the youth levels. Obviously, the NBA is incredible, but like, you got 8, 9-year-olds who are just unbelievably skilled, like, who can do these crazy different footwork and can hit these different step backs when they're, they're 8 years old, and they're doing these things that like most kids can't do until they're, at least when I was playing, that was like 4 years ago. Like, kids weren't doing that stuff till they were like at least 13, 14, 15 years old. And for, a lot of a couple of the speakers, like I know Paul was talking about, like, he watched a 9-year-old come off a ball screen and like scan the floor and be watching the 3-point lines to see if any of his teammates, like if he had that corner guy lifting, or if he had anybody who was open. Like, he's not just looking at score or hit the roll guy. He's also evaluating to see that shake guy in the corner, opposite corner. Like, he's 8 years old and evaluating that sort of stuff happening. That's stuff that like Paul was saying, like, yeah, when I played, kids weren't doing that till they were like 16, 17 years old, right? Doing that when you're 8, 9 years old, it's unheard of. But today, that's how it is. So players specializing in basketball earlier has made it so that basketball is so much more skilled. But the downside to that is that now players are working these repeated patterns, these repeated movement patterns that are specific to basketball, and they are not getting the proper development with a lot of other movements that they would get in different sports, right? If they played soccer or football or whatever, right? Any of these other sports, volleyball, where you might get these different types of movement, you're not being exposed to them at these young ages anymore, so you aren't really developing yourself as a whole athlete the way that, you know, players used to when they would play 3 sports through high school, right? And again, I'm not saying that you have to play multiple sports, but I'm saying that you have to make sure that you don't lack as an athlete because of specialization. So that's one part of it, and that goes back to the games part. So if we're able to Paul called it microdosing sports. So if I'm able to find time as a trainer to microdose these different, 5-10 minutes at the beginning of a session to play spike ball, to play soccer, to play volleyball, to play tag, to just do these different games that kids do, that the kids now aren't really doing because they're specializing and they're playing basketball year round, that's going to help develop them as a whole athlete, right? And so these movement patterns they might not be exposed to, they're going to be able to get exposed to, and that's going to help raise their level as an athlete. And on top of that, you're now exposing them to other movements, so it's almost a little bit of a break from the movements that they are overdoing playing basketball year round, okay? So it goes back to the importance of adding in these different sorts of games. Not only is it great for them mentally and engagement, and it's gonna make the rest of your sessions way, way, way better, right? If you have to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes to play a game, but it's gonna make the remaining 50 minutes of your session really, really high quality, to me, that's pretty much, that's worth it, right? If you also know that those 5 or 10 minutes are gonna make your players better athletes as well, which is gonna lead to them being more successful in the court, then it almost seems like a no-brainer to be able to start adding in games and stuff like that. So that was the second thing, was that skills coaches and performance coaches are going to merge. And if you're a skills coach right now, start understanding that performance side of things, because that's where this industry is heading. It's like you got to be able to understand and do both if you want to maximize the success and longevity of your players. And then the third thing I want to talk about is the importance of figure-it-out ability. And this was something that Tyler Leclerc talked about in his presentation, was explicit versus implicit learning. And all of this means is that explicit learning is learning when you know that you're learning, right? So I'll give you an example in a second, but implicit learning would be learning without knowing that you're learning, right? So an example of this might be, let's say that you want to learn Spanish. The explicit way to do that is to take a Spanish class, right? You know that you're learning. You go to Spanish class to learn Spanish. The implicit way of doing that would be going to Spain and spending 6 months there, right? Where everybody there speaks Spanish and you're kind of immersed into that. What do you think the better way is to learn Spanish, right? Is it the one where you go to a Spanish class for, a couple hours a week, or the one where you're actually in Spain amongst Spanish speakers for months and you have to learn and you have to adapt? Because if you don't like figure it out, if you don't figure out how to say like, hey, I need to buy some food, then you're going to starve, right? So you have to learn how to at least, get the basics down, right? If you can't ask, hey, where's the bathroom? That's a problem, right? That's a problem for you. So that's something for you to consider, right? Is like, which is the better way of learning? Probably the one where you're immersed in the culture and you kind of have to figure it out to an extent, because if you don't figure it out, then you're going to starve, right? As opposed to Spanish class where, you might learn some stuff, but there's nothing on the line, right? It's all kind of given to you. You get to go back home to your neighborhood where everyone speaks English, right? Or at least most people do. Most people speak English. You can go to McDonald's and they speak English there. You can go to whatever, Texas Roadhouse and they speak English there. You don't have to worry about trying to order food in a different language. So that's something to think about right there. It's just that implicit versus explicit learning. So we get to basketball, which is the better way of doing things. Well, an explicit way of learning would be if I am with a player and I say, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to drive to the basket and you're going to step with your right foot, then your left foot, and then you're going to extend the ball out from your body and you're going to finish it underhand. Okay, that's an explicit way of learning it. An implicit way would say, okay, hey, I want you to go to the basket. I want you to finish off of 2 feet. that's a much more like, okay, well, now they have to kind of figure it out a little bit, right? I'm not giving them the exact steps to take. Now, does that mean that I'm never going to do that? I mean, there's going to be times for both of them, but generally, when it comes to implicit learning, the reason that it's better than explicit learning is for a couple of different reasons. The first one is self-organization. So a 5'11" player is going to do things differently than a 6'11" player. So trying to make them do the same thing and fit them in the same box is generally not going to be a good thing. So when you give players freedom to kind of figure things out themselves, they naturally find the best way to kind of get things done, right? And so that's the first part. The second part is long-term learning. So I obviously want my sessions to translate long-term. I don't want to do something in a session and then have my players never do it again because they don't know how to do it. They forget it, right? That's how a lot of times how it is when you give them every single step to take. Or say, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and they do that. They're just following directions. They don't actually have any context of why they did that or how they did it. They're just doing what you told them to do. So when they get to a game and you're not there to tell them what to do, they're not gonna have any sort of recall of that. As opposed to me putting them in a position to implicitly learn it. Maybe instead of making them just finish off 2 feet with no defense, maybe I put a defender on them. And now all of a sudden they have to figure out how to score off 2 feet at the rim, but there's a defender now. So there's a reaction to it. They're implicitly learning what the best way to do that would be. Now when they get into a game situation, they have a recall of that. They've learned that. They have those patterns in their mind already. And then the third thing, kind of going with that, is resiliency, right? So that skill is going to show up when there's pressure, right? It's kind of people say, okay, I want my skills to become second nature. That's how you do it, is implicitly learning things, right? Is you aren't putting in a position where you have to kind of figure it out and, you find the best way of doing things. That becomes something that you can do under pressure when you actually are the one who had to kind of put that stuff together and you have a recall in your mind to go back to, right? So that's one thing right there Tyler talked about, is the importance of implicit learning and putting your players in a position, whether that means more one-on-one or generally just less talking, right? Coaches love to talk in workouts. Just talk a little bit less. Let them figure stuff out a little bit more. Let them struggle a little bit more. And kind of going with that, he talked about, the importance of challenge, right? So when I put my players in positions to implicitly learn things, it's more challenging for them, for sure, right? It adds additional challenge to them, which, without going too far into the science, strengthens the myelin in your brain, which is essentially what improves your ability to do something, right? Those patterns that you're kind of repeatedly going over. So when I increase a challenge for my players and I force them to figure it out implicitly, that is where those connections are made in their brain and they actually get better long term. It makes training uglier when you force them to learn things implicitly, right? Because if I just tell you what to do, you can do it perfectly, and then I look really good, right? Because, my players do things perfectly in workouts. But when they get to games, what's going to happen? It's going to be the opposite of that, right? So when I put them in positions to learn implicitly, they look worse. They play a little bit worse, but it's more real, right? And ultimately, it's going to make them more confident long-term because they've actually had to learn it. And there's so much more I can go into when it comes to challenge, but that's kind of where I wanted to get to. So the 3 things that I learned from the conference is, first of all, you have to connect with the human first before you can effectively connect with the player. Number 2 is skill coaches, post-performance coaches are going to have to merge. So if you're a skill coach, you need to start understanding the performance side of things. And number 3 is the importance of figured out ability. So, again, this is an incredible conference. Shout out to the Master Hoops team, Tyler and Coleman, for putting this on, and all the speakers who were there for sharing their knowledge. Again, there's way more with this too that I'll go into. But I appreciate you guys who are tuned in, who are listening. Again, Apple Podcast, Spotify, everybody is YouTube right now. Drop a comment. Let me know what you learned from this podcast, topics you want to see moving forward. If anybody who's watching this at the conference, let me know what your biggest takeaway was. And I appreciate you guys again for listening. So shout out to all of you guys. Make sure you guys follow on Instagram at Vision Basketball. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.